Excellent. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tracy Dixon from the Office of Special Education Programs. Tracy?
Hello and welcome everyone to today's cohort webinar. We can progress to the next slide. So I'm Tracy Dixon and a project officer on the early childhood team. Just want to kind of review the purposes for today's call. We wanted to share with you the department's commitment and ED's commitment to increasing diversity among scholars who are funded under our programs. We would love for you to engage in a discussion with the presenters to discuss recruitment and retention strategies. This is also an opportunity to network, and we would also love to hear about your ideas for next year in terms of conference topics that you would like to hear about. And last, I'll share some conference updates with you. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so I want to hear about who's on the call. So if you could type your name, your university affiliation in the chat box. And if there are any, it doesn't look like any OSEP, Carlene and Sun Young are on the call. So let's type our information. We have Leahy University, University of Texas, El Paso, Portland, Penn State, University of Oregon. Great. William Drakeford. And we do have some OSEP project officers on the call. And if you all have anything to add before we get started, please hop in, Sun Young or Carlene.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for doing this. Working with OSEP has been great. And I'm just can't thank you guys enough for everything. I've been involved with grants for over a decade now as a PI, and it's just been awesome. So I appreciate you.
Thanks so much. That's great to hear. We appreciate you too. So right now we're going to have a polling question with Sun Young.
Okay, so we're going to put in the poll link in the chat. I know Jen is going to put in the link in the chat. And then you can click on the link and you can answer the question on the page on the mentimeter.com. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment so you can see the results. Let me see how I can share my screen. Share screen. Okay, so thanks for your response. We just asked you which focus area you were funded under. We see about the right kind of percentage. Focus area A is about 30%. The rest of the grantees are focus area B. So thank you. And we have another polling question. Jen, if you could put in the link in the chat.
Just a moment. Sorry, my computer wanted to not play fun today.
No worries.
There you go.
Then I'm going to put this in the present mode. So you can see the results real time. Basic counseling, social work, different disciplines, speech language is leading, early intervention, special education, deaf education, physical therapy, psychology, all the great disciplines we see. Thank you for that. More deaf education, more special education. Okay, 18 people have responded so far. Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing. Did I stop sharing?
Yep, I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Sun Young. Thanks, everyone, for participating in the polls. Before we begin today's discussion, I would like to bring your attention to several federal initiatives that demonstrate our commitment to diversity. As you can see, the links are on this PowerPoint slide, and maybe we can get them into the chat box. But the White House has recommitted itself to supporting diversity, and they have gotten these initiatives back up and running. These initiatives are created to strengthen the nation by improving educational outcomes for diverse Americans of all ages, and to ensure an education at all levels to prepare for college and productive careers. Next slide. On this slide, you will see a link to OSEP's Equity Action Plan. Each department within the government was asked to, by executive order, to develop an equity action plan. You can review it at this link here. And in 2022, this year, OSEP prioritized college access to diverse scholars. In the 325K competition this year, we included a new absolute priority designed specifically for minority serving institutions to apply for funding. Additionally, we are actively developing strategies to expand outreach to minority serving institutions to increase the number of applications that we receive for funding. Given that, this is a great segue into today's discussion as we continue to demonstrate to you our commitment to increase the number of diverse scholars receiving OSEP funding. Next slide. Sun Young.
Sorry, I was on mute. So we have another polling question, but this is an open-ended question. So Jen is going to, she actually put in the link to the question in the chat. So if you could just write down what kind of strategies you have tried to increase the diversity of your scholars. We want to see what kind of strategies you have tried so far. And then I'm gonna be ready to share my screen. Partnering with local district and recruiting paraprofessionals. What a great idea. Social media, direct communications. So see, consulted with our diverse advisory board, reached out to HBUs, I guess that means HBCUs in our area. Another person put in a comment about reaching out to HBCUs. Podcasts, what an interesting idea. We'd like to hear more about that if we have time later. Partnering with cooperating school districts to recruit paraprofessionals, reaching out to MSIs, outreach to schools and local organizations that have a high proportion of racially and ethnically diverse scholars, I guess. I cannot really scroll down. It's really great to see many responses here. It looks like you all are working really hard to increase equity and diversity in your programs. So we really appreciate all of your efforts. And you can continue typing in the responses. We're going to collect all these responses, and when we share our PowerPoint slides, we can attach the responses to our slides too. So the link will still be there. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Sun Young. So on today's discussion, we're going to hear from two project directors from OSEP funded 325K projects. who will share successes, challenges, strategies, and recommendations for recruiting and retaining diverse scholars. We will first hear from Raquel Anderson. Raquel is a professor in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences at Indiana University, Bloomington. Dr. Anderson is the project director for the Speech Therapy Education, Practicum, and Services for Latino Children and Their Families, also known as STEPS. Her research interest is in the intersectionality between the process of language development and child dual language learners and social factors that impact language input and use. We will also hear from Julie Walter, who is the Associate Vice Provost of Innovation and Online Learning and an affiliate professor of the School of Speech, Language, Hearing, and Occupational Sciences at the University of Montana. Dr. Walter is the project director for the University of Montana Online University Training for Rural and Equitable Accessibility and Communication Habilitation, also known as Outreach. Dr. Walter's research interest is preschool and school-age language literacy and development. Additionally, she is interested in evidence-based practice, implementation science, and interprofessional collaborations focused on improved services for children with language and literacy deficits and increasing SLP training and clinical service accessibility in rural areas. Again, we invite you to make this an engaging discussion. Please feel free to share, ask questions, and recommend strategies as we begin to work together to increase the numbers of diverse scholars supported under OSIP funding. Feel free to use the chat box. I'm going to turn it over to Raquel now. Raquel?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully all will be well. And let me know if it's not working. So can you see my slides?
Yep, everything looks good.
Okay. No, I don't want better presentation. I want the slide, sure. If I'm start. Well, thank you for having me, and I am a professor here in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences at Indiana University, Bloomington. And I direct the program that it really focuses on training bilingual SLPs. So I'm going to really quickly go through the program so that you get an idea of where we're coming from in our recruitment, how we start our recruitment based on what we are doing as a program, and strategies also for ensuring retention to make sure that once the students are here, they are successful and they graduate. So a little bit about our program, and the name kind of it is Speech Therapy Education, Practicum, and Services for Latino Children and Families. It is a track within the MA in Speech Language Pathology or SLP program here in our department. And the main goal is to provide the necessary academic, clinical, and service experiences to our students so they can become and go out to the field and work as ethically as bilingual speech language pathologists with a focus in Spanish and English. So we've had 2 grant supports for the Department of Education and OSEP, and we started the program in 2009. So we've been here for a while. Our first cohort graduated in 2011. So within our program, we have an academic component with their specific coursework in addition to the regular MA program that our students have to take. We have clinical experiences embedded throughout their whole experience here and at the university. And within our coursework, as well as on a volunteer basis, we do incorporate service learning. And we partner with community organizations that service the Latino, Latinx community here in Monroe County, which is our county in Bloomington. Let me kind of continue. So they take the first semester, they take a course on just the typical language disorders, and they learn about bilingual children broadly as to what bilingualism is, how to best assess and best practices. And we also embed within our academics what we call tertulias or brown bags, where we discuss issues pertaining to clinical and service delivery, including advocacy for our families. And I'll talk about those in a little bit. And then they are always on campus. While they are on campus, which is 4 semesters, they always have a bilingual child who they work with, or a bilingual placement, which could be a school. It could be doing assessments across various counties in our area, or seeing a child in our in-house clinic. And then they do have to do 2 externships. They leave us and they go and work in a public school with a relatively large Latinx population, as well as a medical placement. And we tried both of them to be with a high Latinx population. And you have to forgive me, I'm in a new building and I sometimes have to wave my hand so that the lights go on. So please forgive me for that. As I said, the students do have the service learning component, and it is embedded within academic curriculum. Some examples are, we work with English as a second language teachers in some schools here, and we go and help children who present with communication disorders within the school, and we do push-in, and we work with the kids in the classroom as well as outside. We have partnered with a community radio and the Spanish radio hour. We've also partnered with the Latino Community Center doing tutoring, as well as in a Spanish heritage program that called La Escuelita, or the little school. And then we also, as much as we can, we volunteer in terms of doing hearing screenings, language screenings in community health fairs, and also within the school. So there's students have a lot. So in terms of our data, I'll go really quickly through that. Our first class, as I said, started in 2009 with the grant. They graduated at 2011. We started small, but we average about 7 students. And from our first class, that was 3, to our entering class in fall 2022, which has doubled to 14. They will start in the fall. We've been very lucky in terms of recruitment of diverse students. And obviously, because we work with Latinx children, the majority of our minority students or marginalized students that come from marginalized backgrounds tend to be Latinx, but we also have Afro-Latinas, we also have Asian Americans, African American students within that mix. I'm very proud to say that about 60 to 70% of the students, I don't have the number, of those students who are from marginalized groups are also first generation college. So we've been very successful in recruiting these students. And it is a success that was incremented. So it didn't start overnight. It's something that we really intentionally worked on. These are things that don't happen immediately, I have learned. So some of the recruitment strategies that we've done, similar to some of the comments made for that question, we do have a website that's part of our departmental website that we also do a lot of marketing, and I'll talk about that. And we also have an open house in the fall, which we started with COVID. So COVID helped us in that respect to provide information across the country to students across the country about our program. So I'll talk about each one. We developed that website, and here's the website link. And again, since its inception, we've had that. We also have a Facebook page, but I get a sense that we're the ones that are using Facebook now. So we have to look for different strategies, but we have it within our MA. So anybody who clicks into information about the speech path program, they have access to information about the bilingual program. And we provide a general description, the requirements for admission. And we also provide information about our alum. Where are they? Who are they? So those that let me put their names and where they're at right now, I provide that information. So we have a list, and we're updating it now as to where they're working, who they are, et cetera. And we also provide little snippets of student comments about the program. And we include within that students from diverse backgrounds making comments as well. So it kind of gives information from the student perspective. We also do a lot of other marketing, and this is very intentional. We have a list of all the undergraduate programs in communication sciences and disorders, and we send a flyer that we developed that we evaluate, we edit every year. We send it at the beginning in the fall to all the undergraduate communication disorders program, to all HBCUs, to all Hispanic serving institutions and other minority serving institutions. We have a list and we update it yearly. And we are kind of intentional of picking which particular departments, because some of these schools do not have a communication disorders department, but there might be a Spanish department, or there might be a psychology department, or there might be a special ed, or there might be education. So we look at those areas where there might be interest within our program, because we do not require an undergraduate degree in communication sciences and disorders. So we do all that stuff. So it's very intentional. It was time consuming, but now that we have it, we can really use it. It's good to have a student worker that can help you in that as well. So we also have an open house, and this is part of marketing, and we send it to the same institutions, another flyer, another information with the link, that when we have an open house, we strategically do it at a time where people in any coast can access. So we do it in the evening in Indiana. And again, it's the same programs. And one of the things that we do and has worked is I do keep a list of all the alum, and alum do show up. And so I provide that opportunity for current students to participate, for alum to participate. I discuss the program, I answer their questions, but then I leave. And students are free to talk to those that are interested in the program, to talk to both the alum and the current students about the program. So, and that has resulted in a few applications for our program. The admissions process, we have changed. You need buy-in from the faculty. This is a graduate program, so it might be different for different programs, but faculty have to buy into a more holistic approach to accepting students or admitting students to a program. We are kind of ranked number 10 in the nation, and so it's very competitive to get in, but we have made a change in terms of our vision, have been trained to do a more holistic approach. So we don't have any more GRE requirement, which sometimes was a barrier for some of our students. And we directly have it in our application process that they have to indicate their interest in the program so that I can reach out. So I reach out to them very early once I get that first application. And we also interview them to check their language skills, and we really do talk to them. And it is a way to kind of for them to get to know us as well. So because they talk to us and they can ask us questions. So it also helps to create kind of an initial connection with the program and with me. When they're in, once they come in, basically we try to do a lot of stuff to keep them here. One of the things that I will say, and I will start backwards, community. I think the program creates a community in and of itself because these are students interested in a particular population. So they kind of cluster together and they create this cohort, not that they don't interact with others, but a cohort of interest. And I think that's really important to support the students. We also provide them a lot of information about supports within the university, like our culture centers, that they can, they're part of the listserv of the culture centers. I make it a point that is, I have the person in charge of the Latino Cultural Center come and talk, as well as community members come and talk at the beginning about the importance in the community with whom they're working. So there's a lot there. And then we also provide the financial support, which is really, really important from the grant, but this is our last year with the grant. So we have been looking at other stuff and it's working really hard with the graduate school. And they have given us a lot of in-state tuition. I get 8 now per year in-state tuitions because a lot of our students are from out of state. And I always search for other supports to send to the students. Oh, there's this grant, there's this scholarship, there's X and Y so that they can apply. Then the last thing I'm going to talk about is mentoring. We do have faculty mentors that are assigned to these students from the beginning. So they have somebody to come talk to at all levels. A current student who's in their second year will be mentoring them as well. And I try to pair them so they have similar histories. No histories are identical and no, each one is individual, but similar histories that could help them navigate through sometimes difficult first year. And then we've started having alum also mentor. So I reach out to the alum, and those that say, yes, I want to mentor, I pair them with the students. So that kind of creates more of a community, and it's another type of support. Then I always, this is one thing that I do for recruitment, for the retention, is I always ask for their opinion at the end of the program, as well as throughout the semester. They have ownership of learning, so they will choose the topics they want to discuss. I do choose some as well, but choose the topics that they want to discuss in the brown bags, and they have ownership into the service learning. So I give them options and they can choose which ones they want to do. So I think giving them that ownership of the learning process is very, very helpful. And I think also interacting with the community kind of gives them a sense that, yeah, this is something that's really important that I want to continue doing. Some of the challenges that I've had is a lot of talking to our students. This is a white serving institution, Indiana University, so is our field, and Julie can talk about that. And so the imposter syndrome is something that's very, very difficult for them, and that's why the mentorship and the faculty, we do meet with them at least twice a semester. How's it going? How can I help you? Etc. Other challenges where we're in Bloomington, Indiana, so it's not really known for a huge Latinx population, but we do have a growing one. So, but I think by doing all this marketing, it helps, especially talking to students who are here and who are alum. Funding, it's always going to be an issue, and that's a struggle that we will continue, and it is a challenge. And then interaction with the other faculty that might not be as bought in as others, and that is always kind of a challenge. But we're working through that with developing some procedures for students to follow when they're having issues with faculty. So my final thoughts, I'm going really quickly, is it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. This is intentional. It has to happen within the department of buy-in with your colleagues that this is important. And I think one of the lessons learned for me is once these students started coming in, the faculty realized how important they were and how much they provided a different perspective in their classes, their learning, etc. I think the recruitment strategies are really, really important. Ours have worked, but I think I need to think of more creative ways as well, using social media. I think it's important to maintain contact with alum to see how they're doing. We do get feedback from them as to how well they were prepared. We talk to their supervisors as well to see how well they were prepared. And then we try to make innovative kind of academic and clinical and service so that they feel that it's something that they can be fulfilled through the process. And we have graduated all our students, so we haven't lost a student. So I'm very proud of that. So that's my final thought. So I will move on and stop sharing. Thank you.
Raquel, we do have one question.
Okay.
How often do mentoring sessions occur, and would it be similar to coaching weekly meetings or occasional meetings?
Well, with the faculty, I think it is more twice a semester. We always do it during orientation and then midway, and then once the other semester starts, and then midway that semester, and then by the end. But I think it also is kind of organic, because sometimes you need to meet more with the students, sometimes you need to meet less. With the students, one of the things that has worked out really well is that a lot of times the students are paired our first semester working together as well in the clinic. So they meet weekly. So they have that really, really more of a connection because they're working together for the service of a client. So that also helps as well. And with the alum and the students, I just give them a framework, and that's up to them. I haven't followed through very well on that because I think considering the work and all the other stuff and the needs of the student with an alum might be a little bit different. But I do get feedback at the end of each semester as to how it's going.
Thank you, Raquel. And I may have missed this, but do the alum get any incentives for participating, or is this service back to the university?
It's service back to the university. They've always said yes, not all of them, but they've always said yes, especially the students from diverse backgrounds. We always have as a brown bag the last before they go on their externships. They have a meeting with our alum that can make it, and we usually have about 12 to 15 alum, and they talk about, they ask them questions about what's life like as a professional, and so I've been lucky. I do keep the list. I think the only thing that's been a struggle for me on a personal basis, and it might be just because I'm not technologically savvy, is that I can't develop a listserv through the university with non-university emails. So I'm always kind of typing all the names in, and that's become a problem, but I can do it.
Great. Thank you, Raquel.
You're welcome.
There'll be other opportunities for questions at the end, but in the interest of time, I'd like to turn it over to Julie now.
Thank you. And thanks, Raquel. That's really great information. I'm going to also share my screen here and be able to still see you all. I had the opportunity to look at Raquel's slides prior to our presentation today, and so many of the strategies that Raquel uses, we certainly use at University of Montana. But I thought I would also talk a little bit about, I think my OSEP program, which we are also in our final year of this program, has focused a little bit more broadly in terms of diversity, of thinking of new learners in a different way that aren't your traditional students who sometimes who aren't necessarily going to graduate school. And in particular, I'm in a state that is very rural. I'm in Montana. Our program, this is a speech language pathology program. Our program is the only program in the state that provides speech language pathology training. And
one sec.
Oh,
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I wish I could. See, look, I have some AAC going on here. Let's hear. Okay, ignore my computer. In any case, that created some unique challenges. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this outreach program that really was focused on rurality in addition to recruitment in our tribal communities across our state. And so we'll think about this as a little bit more of a regional program to think about how to fill some critical shortages that are specific even into the rural West. So with that, let me progress this way. If I keep it in this way, I get to see your faces. So outreach, again, a little bit of a mouthful, but it really has to do with this distance programming. And again, I pause here because we have all now lived through a pandemic, and distance programming might not feel that unique from a graduate perspective. We started, and this program has been an extension to a graduate speech language pathology program with intensive clinical experiential learning that has been happening at since 2011. And of course, I don't, distance education from a graduate, very intensive clinical program was not necessarily happening a lot. And it's really important. And when Raquel talks about buy-in from our faculty, this is certainly part of the mission of this School of Speech Language Hearing that I happen to be the chair of for 6 years throughout most of this grant. I also note that the mission for this OSEP grant had to do with value-added training and we think about tele-intervention, again, not that novel for you all in COVID. Back in 2015, this wasn't happening in terms of thinking about teletherapy on a much more grand scale in our state, as well as in a rural West. And then how we think about we're serving populations and then recruiting in a lot of these tribal areas throughout our state. And then also thinking about, I mentioned what are some of my research interests, but really thinking in terms of our school-age population, thinking about some of those speech language services that are specific to the high needs in some of these places. Again, I just note, I think many of you, as we've done the poll, you all are experiencing this in your different areas of expertise, but just to, again, remind us of the acute and critical shortage, just thinking about having only one training graduate school in the whole state, where between here, which is Missoula, Montana, which is near the Washington border, to other tips of our states, it's almost 700 miles across the way. And so we really had to be thinking creatively about how we create access, because as we think about diversity and inclusion, yes, there's diversity in terms of the groups of individuals that we wanted to recruit for this, but also thinking about accessibility for our new learners that would not typically be accessing graduate education. And knowing then again, how critical that happened to be in our state is that we're 46th in the nation at the time for provision of SLP services. In terms of our rurality, about 44% of our state is rural compared to the 90% average in the nation. And then we have 12 tribal nations that are divided into these main ones that I have illustrated in our map. And so again, as we think about the breadth of our state in terms of access, making sure that we're thinking about how we might be able to provide educational opportunities also across these very diverse cultures of different tribal communities, again, across our state. So we had a real telepractice, rural outreach focus to our recruitment. So yes, we wanted to recruit individuals from these Native American tribal communities, but we really saw it as also recruiting individuals who were willing to stay and serve in those areas, and think about creating training and that was specific and was going to really have large impact in those areas, with the thought that as you train and help to facilitate individuals are working in those communities, it also helps to recruit and create that pipeline, which we really had not had in historical years. And so again, we really had to think about how we were going to make distance accessibility. We're not interested as a group in doing truly asynchronous online. We really looked at doing synchronous broadcast type of training, and then how do we integrate that with these really intensive clinical opportunities that also would take place in home communities where maybe there weren't even certified speech language pathologists currently available, which is another challenge if you think about clinical supervision in these areas, and we had to tackle that as well. Here are some of the goals of our grant. We looked at recruiting with these emphasis in 7 federally recognized Montana reservation areas, in addition to those in rural western states, specifically in the Montana region, but also had focused a lot of our advertising in Washington, as well as Idaho and North Dakota, so some of the western regional reservation areas. And of course, then thinking about how we integrate distance delivery as one, at that time, a little bit of an additional unique skill on top of our current speech language pathology programming, as well as thinking about how we integrate cultural responsivity across our curriculum. And so that was another piece that we really integrated that and thought of that across throughout our programming, which was important as opposed to creating one particular class or what have you. We wanted to make sure that all of our training had some of these elements in it. And then again, thinking about how we serve these individuals to then stay in their home communities to serve populations. So as we again think about recruitment, accessibility was one of the main pieces to this. So one, I'm just going to note, because it wasn't something that Raquel had mentioned, and again, a lot of the stuff that she has already talked about, flyers and thinking about these different kind of home communities we also did. But I also note that one of the things that we were really focused on was thinking about how we created pathways for progression for individuals who weren't necessarily your traditional students. Because again, our program, just like many of yours, was very much in high demand for our graduate programming. Again, we had only been around at that time for 11 years, relatively new, sorry, less than that even when we started this programming. We have 350 applications every year for 35 slots, right? So we had students, but they were traditional students, typically very white in Montana, weren't necessarily pulling from our regional areas. And we really felt the mission, and specifically this particular population of individuals in these rural communities, were not accessing or going on to this more master's degree programming. So we really thought also about our pathways in terms of how we recruit and what offerings are we providing so they have the prerequisites. And so I just add that because I do think it's something really important. So one of the things, although not necessarily part of this OSEP grant, our programming did create an asynchronous online programming for 1 year for leveling up. So thinking about then recruiting from our sister or related disciplines like special education, like education, health. How did then we create access throughout the state for those leveling programs? Again, I think many programs are doing this now, but years ago, this wasn't necessarily as common. So we developed that for students to be able to take online and get the whole leveling program within a year. And then uniquely as a way to create a pipeline for individuals from these diverse backgrounds and communities, we actually partnered with rural school districts as well as even some of the tribal councils to determine if there was funding to be able to help these students actually take these types of 1 year programs as they prepare to get into graduate school. And then those were also opportunities for us to accept individuals early to continue on into graduate school. And there was some funding available. We had to actually change our program a little bit on how we accepted tuition, but that was another way that we were able to make this accessible, that then we had a pipeline of students who then continued into our OSEP programming. And moving on, we went into, I think someone has their microphone open, so you might want to check and see if you need to mute. Then in terms of the actual graduate programming that was funded through this OSEP grant, we created much more of this sort of hybrid high flex programming, where both our main group of campus learners and this group of distance learners, not all, we also had ones above and beyond the individuals just accepted in our OSEP program, in this OSEP program, but usually around 5 to 6 a year that were accepted into the distance learning cohort. And we had to be a little bit specific about then how do we integrated those really intensive clinical opportunities. These weren't necessarily your traditional students. They needed even a little help and support that they hadn't done clinical education before. So how we decided to schedule this is that the very first year were just courses. That's different than our on-campus program where there was clinic in part of every semester. But the first year was academic coursework. Students met each other, came together on campus at the beginning of the year, so they developed these relationships. They were paired had their own cohort, but also were paired with different students who are on campus to their distance counterparts. So they have those connections. And they continued through the year doing their didactic coursework that infused some of these pieces of the curriculum that we were talking about. In terms of cultural responsivity, having even seminar classes where there were discussions about this, as well as even starting to train and think about what it means to do teleintervention in a different way. Then by the first summer, they came to campus for very intensive clinical experiences. Then thus, again, I'm thinking about funding reasons that they could room together, they could house together in different ways to then be part of these clinical intensive experiences that then prepared them to go back into their home communities for the whole second year where they did their clinical experiences in their home communities with mentorship as well. From our home campus. So that's the way that we had done that. Let's see here. Beyond then the clinical experiences, certainly again, thinking about how we train for telepractice and infusing that, then let's think about, well, how did we retain them? What were some of the really important things to help these individuals achieve success? We always think about funding. Again, these students were really funded where they had full tuition, stipends. Many of these individuals still had to juggle jobs because they were less traditional students that had come back to school, second careers. And so we have been told over and over that the stipend was significant. It was $10,000 each year at the time. I think it's even increased now. We probably should increase it. But then having full tuition, paying for that housing when they came in the summers for these 4 to 6 weeks increments were just important for them to be able to step out of their lives, if you will, or go part-time or what have you in terms of their careers to be able to achieve this. The other part of this is that we had partnerships across the state. We had other grants. We had grants to fund the supervisors who were in these rural communities. It was separate from OSEP to increase their continuing education, have education on how they might help facilitate the success of these students because they hadn't had access to that, which allowed them to continue to be certified or become certified in their to be able to then supervise these students. So those were really important pieces. The other thing, again, I talked about we had peer connections, we had matching them to peers, we had mentorships in terms of, really important pieces. We had a liaison that had from the start was their connection to our program. If you think of first generation college students, university students, they need help with almost everything in terms of forms, especially also if they're not in campus, to have that connection, someone they trusted that they could connect to at any time. It's really important. We also included them in a lot of our resources on campus that included, resources that were available to them off campus, but were part of our community. So for example, our Payne Native American Cultural Center was very important. There are mentors that are assigned through that. So it was an additional resource that we had available at our institution that wasn't necessarily part of this grant. In addition to then just mentorship from faculty, where in any semester they had their graduate advisor, this liaison, and faculty who were checking in over time. So I leave it again. We could talk many hours about this, but in terms of our outcomes, again, we're finishing up. We were able to recruit students from all of our students were from rural communities, committed to staying in those rural communities throughout Montana, the regional West. 25% of them from our American Indian regional tribes. And since graduating, all of them are serving in these rural areas that include reservations in our Confederated Salish, Kootenai, Blackfoot, Crow, Northern Cheyenne, and Lakota tribes. And I guess just to give you a little sense of how important it is that these individuals are out there, whether they themselves are a member of a tribal nation or serving as models with cultural sensitivity, awareness, and these graduate degrees for these services. One individual who just graduated, she just took a job in a school district in one of these tribal communities. That job has been open for 25 years, and she just took it in a school district. This is the type of shortage that then, as she's serving, she's then already talking about and mentoring other individuals who say, yeah, I think I'd like to go. I can do this. I can stay where I am and go to graduate school. And they see it in, again, the mentor who's now in those communities, right? And this is the story, and this is the pipeline that has, again, as Raquel says, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, but now it's working. And I will just say, I mentioned this is the OSEP grant with a particular area, our particular focus on rurality, in its sense, is a little bit of a cultural focus in itself. And then particularly our different Native American communities, I will say, once then we created the space for this in our program, our on-campus diversity increased as well, right? We were then from our Western regional areas, individuals are starting to see themselves in the students that were there, right? And that's also a really rich piece that I don't include here as a direct outcome of the grant, but it's an indirect outcome of increasing our diversity by about 25% across our whole on-campus program, and allowing us to think a little bit more thoughtfully as we accept students, like just as Raquel talked, GRE scores, background, what are our expectations? It really created an opportunity to have those rich discussions with our faculty so that we didn't have just our standard traditional frankly, white student from a very high income background that were being accepted year after year, right? We were really thinking a little bit differently about our learners. So with that, I end, I don't know, I use this quote only because you talk about like someone who's 560 miles away in one state, and there was no way that she would be able to do this without being able to have that rural access, and I guess the power and the empowerment that brought to these students. So I stop there and then stop my sharing. I'm hoping that gives a little bit of more complementary information to the wonderful stuff that Raquel just presented.
Tracy, did you want to talk about the leadership in the project directors conference that's coming up?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. I put a couple reminders in the chat box about upcoming conferences. And at this time, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Bay. Many thanks to her. She is the project officer for both of these wonderful projects, and she's going to close us out today.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. First, I wanted to say Tracy sent an email out to all us project officers and said, hey, could you guys recommend any grants that are doing innovative and great work in this area? And I said, I have some, me. And so I'm so happy that both of you were able to share. And I think everyone really appreciates hearing from other centers, especially during this, this challenging work, and hearing some really great success stories. So thank you so much from OSEP. I'm sure people can reach out or send you personal messages if they have any questions. So I want to thank you again and thank everyone else for their participation on this call.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, everyone. Happy summer.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.